Party has a new leader, and today I, as a foreigner, will tell you what to think about it. But to not look too condescending, I've invited two people from Britain to for basically cover, so I don't look as bad. But more seriously, the UK Conservative Party has did indeed elect their new leader. This has been a race that has been going for a few months, maybe even, I believe. Basically, there were a few rounds where in every round, they eliminated one potential candidate, and at the end, it was a vote of all members. We'll talk a little bit, maybe even about the election, about what brought us here, and also about the new leader of the party and what she might bring to the UK Conservative Party. So let me immediately go to Marco, because welcome to the Daily Objective. Joining me today is Marco Richard. As I mentioned, they actually do live in the UK, so they have a bit more insight than I do currently. But basically, just to to bring us up to speed, basically what happened before this. So question for you, Marco. Where is the previous leader? What happened? Why is Rishi Sunak gone?
Yeah, well, the short answer is was crap. He was totally incompetent. He ran a government that was, close to the current one, really, nothing to do with conservatism, and he deserved to be booted out together with most of his MPs. And frankly, 4 months after the election, they got the pro-jihadi people in charge, the Labour Party. We find finally with a new leader of His Majesty's government official opposition, Kemi Badenoch, again a woman. It's the fourth woman who takes the leadership of the Conservative and Unionist Party, and she's 44. She has limited experience in previous roles as minister in government. However, as far as I can tell, she looks quite good. As you said, we're in Britain, but really the interest stops here, really. Being just leader of the opposition, she's not going to be able to do anything for the next 4 years, up to 5 years, until the next general election. Therefore, yeah, she can try and steer the party some direction, but what she can actually do is a very limited amount of stuff. So, yeah, it's a curiosity, really.
And of course, sorry, I just wanted to add, you've got to consider how much the Conservative Party, the Tory party, which she now leads, was utterly decimated at the last election. So they've gone right down to like 121, I think, MPs in Parliament. So it certainly is pretty damn low, given that they had a big majority, the biggest since Thatcher before then, under what was initially Boris and a couple of others since. But yes, it's the fact that there's 5 years to go anyway. So this is at the moment kind of a sideshow. She's got to rebuild a party from the ground up, and she's got to rebuild it with the rump of people left in Parliament who are those that weren't booted out by the electorate solely because of the size of their majorities in their respective constituencies, like the safer seats. And because of that, they're not necessarily those that are pro-change. They're just the what's left, what's been, what's still stuck on the benches like old barnacles that you can't remove. That's who she's got to work with in terms of getting the party off the ground again.
Yeah, so you mentioned the election result. I think I've caught the site somewhere. It's like the worst election result since like 1860 something or 70 something, like a long time. So I just want to maybe just quickly talk about the election, maybe itself. Basically, when it came to this election, almost every week I've messaged Marco and Richard, hey, do you want to talk about this? And they're like, no. But now that someone got elected, there's probably some time. But just quickly, Richard, can you just give us brief overview of basically how this election generally works, and basically why it took so many months?
It doesn't have to take so many months. The party itself can decide how long it takes, and they chose to take their time over it. Too long, to be honest, because it was quite clear. There were 6 candidates standing, 6 possible leaders of the Conservative Party, and it's taken it's taken 4 months to get to the last two, who were the most popular two for most of it. Even at the beginning, there was a slight hiccup partway through when one of the people who didn't make the last two was actually in the lead in one of the interim polls. But leaving that aside, basically the two main front runners took it to the end, so it was pretty obvious to anybody really who was going to be the two front runners, and all it has done is cost a lot of time for there being an sort of absence of opposition, a complete vacuum during a period of time when the actual Labour Party, the government of the UK, has been through some turbulent first 100 days plus of being in government, including riots across the summer, to do with immigration and various other causes related to follow. Well, I won't get into all that now because I'd take the whole show, to be honest. But anyway, some riots in the summer. And various other aspects which have created scandals and stuff, which has created a big vacuum for them. So actually, the latest poll actually showed the Conservative Party just being ahead of the Labour Party, despite them having won a massive majority. Now that is utterly meaningless, quite honestly, because all that says is that Labour make a dog's dinner of their beginning, and that there is no other party to get annoyed with. Until now, Kemi takes it on. So I could get into the detail of the fact that ultimately, between those last two candidates, it's only 130,000 members of the Conservative Party who actually belong to the party who made the decision. Only 70-something, low 70s, decided to actually cast a vote. So the winning vote for Kemi Badenoch was in the 50-odd thousands as opposed to the 40-odd thousands for her opposition guy. They're both on the right-hand end of the party, if you want to call it right-left. That's got its own problems to doing that. But anyway, they're both not desperately ideologically apart anyway, the last two that ended up there. So, yeah. Well, anyway, that's the history of how we've got to now.
Yeah, for the two people who are interested watching this, I should point out that the initial 6 candidates were whittled down to two by the parliamentary party, i.e. the MPs that are currently elected in Parliament. So that they voted and eliminated one at a time. That's why it took so long. And at the end, you left with two candidates, and these two candidates were sent to the members of the Conservative Party in order to vote on. So the ultimate choice, although it starts from a selection from the parliamentary party, is done by the Conservative Party members, which can pose a problem because, as we saw with Liz Truss, she wasn't popular with the parliamentary party, although she won the Conservative membership vote, which meant that she found it really hard to construct some sort of a coalition within a party in Parliament which would support her government. And Kemi Badenoch might well find hard to try and jostle and trying to put together some sort of strong team, because bearing in mind that part of this 100-odd MPs still elected, despite probably should deserve to be fewer than that, have still been elected with the old leadership, if you like. So you might well find some sticks in the mud, some people who don't want to change to whatever direction she wants to impose. So it's going to be a tough job for her, not only because she's in opposition, but also because she's finding herself with effectively a machine she didn't design herself. And of course, you also fighting against the civil service. So it's a double whammy, really. Good luck to her.
Yeah, just to build a bit on the point of like being opposition. So I don't know that much about specifically the UK parliamentary system, but generally the way parliamentary systems work, even if you have a government and you have like the clear sort of leading party, it's oftentimes said like, okay, the opposition is just going to do nothing for 4 years. But oftentimes in parliamentary systems that are properly set up, the opposition has a lot of tools where they can fight against the government, either, try to bring in some problems with the specific laws they are trying to pass, make it longer, bring different points against it. So having basically opposition go limp even for 2 months or so can, as you said, been devastating, as well as they can bring it to the public. Basically, if you don't have anyone actually speaking out against the government in the parliament itself, they are sort of allowed to just go on. So that's why I think it's important to basically be active even in opposition, at least, and in the parliamentary systems, I know. But so I definitely wanna talk about what this means for the Conservative Party. So you mentioned that sort of her and the her like front runner, I guess, Robert Jenrick, were pretty similar. Can you tell us a little bit about Marco? Can you tell us a little bit about, well, generally maybe the 6 candidates that were going to be, and even when it comes to this front runners, that basically what this means for the Conservative Party, if it's changing in a certain way, because it's important to remember that United Kingdom, the way the sort of elections are set up, it is also a de facto two-party systems. So you have these two big parties, and but what it also means is you have a lot of factionalism, because how big the parties are and the fact that they are, in a sense, basically elected independently. They are not just picked by the party itself, they are elected in specific constituency. They have a certain amount of independence. So what would this mean? Well, I guess it's 2 questions. So first, what does this mean for the Conservative Party? Both that the 2 last people that were elected were sort of similar, and did the Conservative Party, in your view, well, I'll leave that for another question. Okay, what does this mean for the Conservative Party for the next few years, if let's say she even wins the election?
Well, but, I mean, the election is so far away. I mean, what she needs to do now is actually create a new direction for the Conservative Party. Her catchphrase is renewal for the party itself. She's laid out some sort of ideas, and she's clearly making a clear line between the previous 14 years of conservatism and what she wants to push. She wants to push a Conservative Party which is going to work for the next 10 to 20 years, according to what she's been talking about. The Conservative Party started the path to power in 2010 with a coalition, funny enough, which is fairly unusual for British politics. But since then, they consistently won the 2 or 3 following general elections with a slim to large majority under Boris Johnson. Now, she's a fairly unique character, given that she comes from the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party, unfortunately, lurched quite badly towards the left. It had become like another kind of New Labour under Tony Blair kind of party, sort of pro business, but not really. Love statism, love interventionism. That's why it's the party that brought us the lockdowns, stupidly enough. It's the party that crashed the economy by imposing lockdown and spraying money left, right, and center in such a irresponsible way, which effectively declared the total end and death or Margaret Thatcher party. Kemi Badenoch, she's fairly young, she's 44. I think what's on her side, she didn't grow up here in Britain. She grew up in Nigeria. Her parents are Nigerian, I think. Her dad was a GP, her mom a physiologist, so she has a scientific background. She herself is a software engineer. And she, in a speech she made, something that really chimed nicely to me. She said something like, I'm an engineer. Engineers accept the reality. It's like, oh, thank God for that. Finally, we hear something like that. And I think to have somebody who's an engineer, who understands things, who accepts science, not as a cult, but as, as something that allows you to understand reality, will actually be a breath of fresh air. Margaret Thatcher herself was a chemist. And since then, we had a mishmash of political, kind of humanities, confused heads and stuff like that. So I think her background in itself will get her to come up with something meaningful, at least something that is fairly realistic and something which will allow her to perhaps set tracks in the kind of quagmire in politics that we have in Britain so far. And I think it's going to be well received on the ground by conservatives and perhaps even the people who didn't vote last time.
Yeah, it's early days, of course. I mean, even when Margaret Thatcher became the leader of the opposition back in the late 70s, you had no idea she was going to go on to be as good a prime minister as she was. And of course, every Conservative leader since then has promised to be the equivalent of Margaret Thatcher and has singularly flopped and failed pretty quickly. So no matter how good some of the talk is, it's yet to be proven. And the relentless trail of failures up until now that lie behind us mean that we're all a bit cynical about it, despite any hopes that we may have. Kemi Badenoch has pointed out the extent to which the Conservative Party has talked right but governed left. That's a quote from her, which reflects what Marco was saying there. And she's talked about, this is another quote, the Conservative Party has been, quote, winning elections, but not the broader argument at stake. And she's very much focused on concentrating on getting the principles right. And this is what makes her slightly different to a lot of the others. She was in the course of the contest, particularly against the opponent, Robert Jenrick, she was constantly being pressed on individual policies for what was your view on this policy here or that policy here. And she was really trying to talk about the fact that it was principles that were important and defending the right principles of liberty and those kind of things, which were necessary, and personal responsibility, that kind of stuff. So so she is trying to start from the ground up. She's trying to lay out the principles. This is what makes her different, I think, because she's articulate. She's clearly a thinker. She's clearly thinking about the proper ways of transforming the Conservative Party and making it based on the right factors. Doesn't mean she's always right, of course. She does say some dodgy things as well. We can get to those. But one other quote, just on the positive side: liberty is a practical necessity for a flourishing society, not just a philosophical nice to have. So she really is talking the right kind of language, and she's certainly pointing out some of the flaws which they need to properly attack. And she's been very strong on criticizing the corrosive effect of wokeism and the fact that it really considered essays analyzing the authoritarianism of people who accept the whole intersectionality kind of thinking, and how their sense of injustice always leads them to want more state, and that you've got to take the argument really. You've got to make it forcefully, and you've got to explain yourself properly, not apologetically, not in relation to how they're arguing, but talking about from the ground up. So I think all of those are good signs, because she's always talking about how the other side they're just justifications for coercion, and that's obviously what us as objectivists are fighting against when it comes to what politicians want to do.
So I think you've mentioned most of them, but do you have, if you had to pick like one biggest sort of plus that or maybe even expectation you would want from someone like Kemi Badenoch when it comes to sort of, yeah, basically mainly it's about the next election, or at least what's gonna happen if she can succeed in the next election. And yeah, what would you, if there was like one thing you would want from her, what would be the thing that you would hope she could either change or basically implement? Maybe not even like specific policy, but maybe even sort of going to the more principled way when it comes to sort of the core of the Conservative Party.
Yeah, I mean, we saw she had a debate, I think in 2018, with Yaron and some other socialist guy, and she had some ideas, but since the stuff I've seen she's written since is actually a bit stronger in terms of principle. At one point, she even makes the point that principles give certainty. Go figure, in this day and age, a politician talking about certainty. It's like, well, sci-fi, isn't it? And she talks about equality under the law, personal responsibility, and regarding the five pro-jihadi MPs that we have in Parliament, she said that this kind of sectarianism is an alien idea that doesn't have any place in Britain. So it's very good. It's very good that she's pointing out what the issues are, and if she could, if you like, recreate the soul of the Conservative Party, recreate the kind of focus on the individual that the Conservative Party should have. Get rid of statism, get rid of the idea. Well, she's already also talking about getting rid of the net zero stuff, policy-wise, which can only be good. So she definitely understands the importance of the individual, that the individual has to be put at the center of the politics that effectively looks after the interests of the individual rather than being dictated by the state to this extent. Of course, as I mentioned earlier on, because she grew up in Nigeria, she actually experienced socialism on her own skin. She was sent to school by the state, the school that the state wanted. The local water company was nationalized. Therefore, she had to walk yards in order to get water and all this kind of stuff, electricity. So she experienced what a state does and what a state cannot do, and she's quite vocal about it. And that's it's refreshing. Certainly, it's very new in Britain. I wonder how it's going to be taken, because she will have to face a wall of snowflakes which have been spoon-fed for the last 10, 15 years with the kind of victimhood status that they like so much and makes them feel comfortable. So lots of people will bristle by at the hearing of these ideas she's got, but most of Britain will get it, because we can still get it. Not for long, but we are still at the point where we can be saved and brought back from the brink.
I mean, I just want to build quickly upon this, because as you mentioned, every conservative leader sort of wants to adopt the successor of Margaret Thatcher, and I guess it's sort of similar that basically when Thatcher was chosen as the conservative leader, but also later as a prime minister, UK in that time was from what I believe, in really terrible shape. Basically, it had to go real bad we'll even try capitalism, it's so bad. So do you think that's what inspired, maybe now for Richard, do you think that's what inspired her election? And what do you think, it's sort of like similarities everyone likes to do, but do you think there are some things that are similar? And more importantly, do you think there are like major differences?
In the 70s, prior to Margaret Thatcher coming to power, we had a 3-day working week in the UK because we couldn't keep the lights on, because and we had lots of strikes and mountains of rubbish in the streets, and the country was absolutely broken. And Thatcher brought it back from that. Now, although we're not at that stage in the same way, that there is a mass disillusionment with how the state of Britain, pretty much across the board. Nobody's very happy with it at the moment. So there is that kind of, and the riots were in some measure of reflection of that, in part with other complicating factors. But I think what makes her similar to Margaret Thatcher is I don't think she is desperate to be liked. I think she is prepared to say what is unpopular but true. And instead of, and I think people are ready to recognize what's true, given that they've been endlessly fed a load of old bull, and it's been quickly turned on its head, and proven not to be true. And even the speed with which Labour's popularity has fallen since in the few months they came to power is an example of that. But because she can say things that aren't popular in the current culture, like for example, here's a quote from her: "Not all cultures are equally valid." Now, that's like an atomic bomb within the Labour Party to say that, particularly from somebody of Nigerian heritage, or at least, I mean, she's born in Southwest London, but grew up in Nigeria. So a lot of that is. She's not afraid to rattle some cages. She's often referred to as abrasive, but that means I think that tends to be from her opponents, including whether those opponents are the civil service, when she was in various ministerial positions within government before they were booted out in July. So she's tackled the civil service head on a number of times, and she's pointed out, for example, somewhat controversially to the civil service loving classes, that about 5 to 10% of the civil service are really, really bad. She called them should be in prison bad. Now that is feisty talk. She can be pretty feisty, but she's certainly recognised, and in her early speeches to her opposition, the deputy leader of the country now, about how to run the country. First few interchanges across the dispatch box in the House of Commons, she's made the point that, look, you're going to be fighting the civil service. This is how, this is why, and she's really laid that out. Now, the civil service tends to work with the left anyway, so they don't present the same kind of barriers that they do to a right-leaning government. I think that's certainly true. But yeah, some of the differences, I don't yet to tell, I think, to be honest. But she is her own person. She's very much her own person. And I think lots of the other characters down the years have been trying to pretend to be a Margaret Thatcher in character and policy, whereas I think where the similarities are, they are based more on principle, so they're more solid comparisons potentially.
Something someone in the chat asked, and I think it's a interesting question. So what we've seen in the last election is, well, many people being disillusioned with the Conservative Party, maybe even some people that are present, and many people jumped on or sort of started leaning towards the Reform Party. Despite, I think, Reform Party doing, when it comes to popular vote, doing decently well, they've ended up getting just, I think, 3 seats or something. 5. But so someone was asking, will this basically put Reform in a stronger position, or basically what will happen with Reform now? Because at least from my limited understanding, it seems that the Conservative Party is going maybe a bit more in the Reform route. Of course, it's not completely taking over, but could this mean that basically the Conservative Party once saw what happened with the election, and basically that their voters went somewhere else and are basically trying to bring them back? Marco, what do you think?
I think, to be honest, the traditional Conservative vote stayed at home largely, and most of the Reform votes are actually coming from the Labour side. It's a Labour Party that there's hemorrhaging votes towards Reform, although Reform is more of a Conservative light kind of thing. And then talking about Conservative and Reform, they both have bad ideas fundamentally in their structures, but they're not as bad as Labour, of course. So right now, Reform and Conservative, they represent some sort of a light at the end of the tunnel. And if Kemi Badenoch manages to return the Conservative Party towards the center right, she will probably get whatever Conservative vote went to Reform. And I'm sure Reform will benefit from, especially the North, where there's a high concentration on Labour votes, will definitely go there, because the current Labour government is quite a disaster. There's nothing to laugh about because it's my government. It's gonna cause all sort of mayhem. But generally, the country, even the Conservative leadership, already voted for Liz Truss when she was on a more liberal bill, if you like, when it came to her election. So there's definitely an appetite on the ground for proper conservative, old-style conservative values. We never know. I mean, I don't think Reform is right now. Yes, it's challenging directly the Conservative, but I don't think Reform ultimately will cause much of a problem. If anything else, because when push comes to shove, there's going to be some sort of support from Reform for the Conservatives. Because they share lots of stuff together, and they appeal in the North. So it might help to get somewhere away from the current mess of a government we found ourselves with.
Yeah, I think even if that's on a policy by policy basis, certainly further down the Parliament, when maybe there's been a few by-elections, maybe the makeup changes, or possibly in a second term if Labour manage that. But we're talking so far out, everything's so changeable. To be honest, it's hard to say. I think based on the parliamentary numbers, though, Reform is not significant. at the moment, and won't be until each election. Now, there'll be things like local elections come next year for the local, all across the country, in many parts of the country, not everywhere. It's complicated, but so that will be an opportunity for us to see come, I think it's May, be a first opportunity at the ballot box to see how the electorate is evaluating this mixture of parties. And that will be one of the first elections of that nature in a while, where Reform will have stood a load of candidates as well. So you'd also see how that's in the mix, together with not having Rishi Sunak and the legacy of the past. Having had a bit of a Labour government, you sort of reset the clock on, would Labour be any better? And you've kind of proven no, they wouldn't. So now you've got to look at the full panoply of options. At least that's what I think. I wanted to just squeeze in a quick quote on the negative side, because I don't want to just give it all.
Then let me ask it, because I was going to ask the question.
Okay.
What do you think is basically sort of the biggest negative when it comes to Kemi Badenoch, and maybe even sort of like if there is like a negative shift of the conservative, like a certain aspect of her that might be a negative shift. And I'll just add to here, if you have anything else to say, because the sort of the opposite of Margaret Thatcher was sort of Liz Truss, basically get in and get out pretty quickly. So I guess that might not be an issue here, since she's not a prime minister. It's going to take a while since she even has an executive role. But if you want to add anything on that comparison, feel free to now.
No,
Well,
just
Richard was going about the. I want to start with the biggest negative.
Okay, on the negative, possibly there's a bit of a religious side to it, but not in a US side. I've got to stress that, because there's no politicians in the UK that match the religious side of the US. So I mean, because in Nigeria there's a little bit of element of the Christian side to it. I mean, here's a quote which from an objective's point of view makes you just want to go, because it's depressing. But the foundation of society is not the individual, it is the family. Okay, well, yeah, I'll just moving on. I think she's emphasizing an aspect that is the more negative aspect, although she's also stressing the individual in a much broader sense when it comes to individuals reacting with other individuals in society. But there's a little bit of the Christian taint to it, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, in short, a negative side is that she's a conservative, and with all the baggage that comes with it. But she just started, so it's very hard to tell what she's going to be doing and what she's going to be saying. But as far as I can tell, she's a conservative with some kind of principles behind her, which can only be good news, especially in this day and age. I mean, feels like you're entering Narnia when a politician starts talking about principles and truth and all this kind of stuff. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. And I think she will go the distance as well. I think, as you say, because she's not already in government, and because the Conservative Party is growing from the rump that it is, she's got time. She will. I would be amazed. I'd be frankly amazed if she isn't the leader that leads into the next election come 4 or 5 years' time. So she's got time to build it up properly, and they've got a reason to let her build it up properly.
Let me thank our new members, A, and also James. Thank you so much for you two becoming a new members. Thank you, Jeff, for your super chat. Thank you, Bonnie, for your super chat, and thank you, Jonathan, for your all of you for your super chats. So those were mostly my questions. I hope she'll be the best thing we can hope for. Anything you guys like to say at the end, Marco?
Well, just one thing I wanted to add. She was, before the election that they lost, she was Secretary of State for the International Trade. And she was right in the middle of setting up an international trade with Israel, even despite the war going on. So, she understands stuff. She knows where good and bad is. So, fingers crossed. I can only say fingers crossed right now, because we've been disappointed before. So I wouldn't be surprised. But so far so good. Looks positive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, we need as many positive possibilities as possible. But I can make a broad point, which is that no politician is going to save us. Not in the UK, not anywhere else, not this year, not this decade, not this century. Not without the cultural change necessary. People have to come to a recognition that the culture needs to change in order to get anywhere. And I think one of the things that she quotes her father, I think, I can't remember the exact quote, but she often makes the point that he made the point to her as a child, which is that 80% of your life, is totally in your hands for you to change, and only 20% is up to others. Now, we can quibble about those numbers, but basically the core point being that you can make you are the one that makes your life better, and politicians are frankly irrelevant in the context of that. The amount of power you have as a person to affect your own life is huge, and that is where you should start if you're dissatisfied with your immediate surroundings and your own life.
Yeah, as I always like to say, it's always, fun to talk about politics, and it's always fun to yell about politics, and also have, say that there are certain problems when it comes to society, when it comes to politics, when it comes to the world. But at the end of the day, the only thing you can control is your own way, the way you look at it and what you do. So that's what you have to do. That's why I'm pretty happy most of the time, because if things are bad, I cannot do anything about them. And if I can, then I'm going to do them.
So young, so wise.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm always gonna stay this way. I've been like this since I was 4 years old. Thank you, Seamus, for becoming a new member. And thank you, everybody, for watching today. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Objective and the reality show. Oh, sorry, I just read a comment. Thank you, everybody, again. Thank you guys for joining me today and for helping me get through this. And bye-bye.
Bye.